Welcome to Romance Unzipped, your happily ever after book club. I'm Holly.
And I'm Annie. We read, write, and obsess about all things romance.
Let's dive in.
Hey.
Hi, I'm Holly.
Hey, everybody. I'm Annie. This is Romance Unzipped, your happily ever after book club. Today we are reviewing Thirsty by Mia Hopkins. Holly, what's the quick and dirty?
Well, this is a contemporary romance set in East LA. The main character is from a gang. He's an ex-convict. This is definitely a slow burn. One of the tropes is he falls first. And this is a little bit more of a serious book. It kind of really hits you right in the feels. Not
Yeah.
as light and sort of wacky and lighthearted as some of the other books we've been reviewing.
Yeah, it's very tender. The writing is so beautiful, I think. And it's so interesting because it's told a single narrator, first person point of view, just from the main male character, Salvador Rosas, which is totally unique, I think, in most romance,
Mm-hmm.
male, female.
First time I've read that.
Yeah, and it was just so beautifully done because he is, as a narrator, he is this very romantic person.
So the steam level on this book is a 4 out of 5, I would say. Maybe a 3. Depends on your definition.
I agree. The content, it was spicy when it was spicing,
Mm-hmm.
but it was most of it was a very emotional. It was like an emotional story. So for people who there's a lot of readers who prefer to have the intimacy be really like intertwined with the character
Mm.
development and the relationship. And this is very much an expression of like passion and love, which I mean, I guess every romance novel is, come on, but it was like there's this emotional investment
Sure.
from
The
it
sex
full.
scenes were part of their growth. They weren't
Yeah,
just there
yeah,
for eye candy.
yeah. And from the start, from Salvador's point of view, he wanted Vanessa, the main female character, since like junior high. He was been kind of pining for her. So he's just like, she is the ultimate for him. So it's never just like, oh, I just want to get laid, you
Yeah,
know?
he both loves the details about her, the way she is making it out of this really hard community that he's from, the way she's raising her daughter, the way she's having success professionally. There's all these tangible things about her that he loves, but he also just loves the idea of her. She represents this idealized version of what it means to grow up in his community and be faced with the same obstacles he's faced with, but somehow, um, unlike anyone else that he knows or that he grows up with, she was able to rise above it all. And
Yeah.
it's not that she avoided all the conflict. She has her own past involving the gang. So she didn't avoid it. She just somehow managed to rise above it. And I think that's aspirational for him too. So that might also be what draws him to her.
Yeah. So this is the first time Holly and I have not been in person together when we recorded. We're on
Hmm.
Zoom. So if you're just listening, you wouldn't know. But if you're watching it, we are in our respective separate places, and I love it. But also, I miss being right next to you.
I know it's not quite the same.
There's this like juice that's there. But also, I just feel a little bit more subdued about this book. Not because I loved it less, but it's hard. It's like angst isn't even the right word because sometimes with angst, I kind of, for me, with romance novels, is synonymous with this overly like dramatized events or emotions. And this is just, he is come from being in a gang, and he went to prison at 19 and he was there for 5 years. So he's 24 when the story takes place. So but mostly it just is this like painfully feels so true lived experience, less than this kind of like fictionalized, like larger than life. Like I read a lot of mafia, and it's so
It does
movie
feel,
cinematic.
it doesn't feel fictional in the same way. I agree.
No.
If you read Mafia or Motorcycle Gang, it's kind of the same content, sort of on paper. It looks the same. Oh, it's a convict, or they are dealing drugs and making money. But this feels almost like historical fiction in the sense that it really seems like it could be true.
Yeah,
And
I
where
think
some of those books,
100%.
like you said, it's a little more over the top. It's just you're reading it for entertainment.
Yeah, this is just heartbreaking because it's this really smart, emotionally tender, really sensitive man who has grown up in a neighborhood that really loves one another and cares about each other, and also is kind of overseen by this gang. And most of the young men and many of the young women get pulled into this gang, and like his grandpa was in it, his dad was in it. And so the story is more of you, like the reality of life when you're just faced with these very limited options, and this conflict he has in himself of like coming out of prison and wanting this change and feeling this inevitability of like this this group that kind of owns part of him, and how is he going to have this thing he wants, which is like Vanessa and a home and like a life and a family. And then there's this other side where he's like, he's been a violent person. We used to chop cars. He went to prison. He was in prison for 5 years, you know? So it's just such a, it's kind of heartbreaking because it is a reality that probably a lot of people have had to experience.
Hmm. Yeah, what was striking to me about Salvador, the main character, is how sympathetic I was toward him. Just from in the first chapter, I just wanted to give him a hug. And
No.
he's this example of two things being true at once. He was a gang member and a criminal, and he doesn't talk about it in a lot of detail, but he does say he used to beat people up, and this whole gang they sell drugs and they steal cars, and he does say, thankfully I never had to kill anyone. So he wasn't that violent, but it seems like they do pretty much everything else and they intimidate people to get what they want. So he's got that inside of him. And then on the other hand, he wants more for himself. And it's clear as a reader from the way he is describing his past and the way Vanessa kind of contextualizes what it means to be a part of the gang that he was faced with not many choices. And maybe he didn't make good ones, but he didn't really have good ones at his disposal. And I think that's what makes him such a sympathetic character, despite his rough background. But what is the heartbreaking part to me was the way he internalized this difficult situation. Is it was just, well, I'm a piece of shit. He feels shames for it. He feels shame for it, and he's got so much negative, just cruel self-talk. And when he's talking about if things are going to work out with Vanessa, in his mind, he's saying things like, "Of course I'm going to disappoint her. Of course I'm going to let her down. I'm a piece of shit, and nothing ever works out when I touch it. It gets ruined." And he feels that way. He starts getting panic attacks or anxiety attacks once he's out of prison and he's in the real world and he's taking public transportation and there's all these people all around.
It's not
And
super regimented. He doesn't
right,
have control. Like he went from this hyper controlled scenario to no holds
life.
barred. Anything can happen.
Even when he was a teenager, it was probably that highly controlled because he was within the hierarchy of the gang.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
But
chaotic, but also out
there's
of
a
his
system
control. Yes.
that so the opening line of the book, it just hooked you. So everything that I've shared, it sounds like maybe you wouldn't want to read it, but you do. You really want to read this book. It's so beautiful. Her writing's really, really beautiful. And this is a great example of this is the first paragraph. And he sees himself as the anti-hero. And so many of the books that I read and that so many people read, there's like the morally gray anti-hero, you know, who's like kind of revels in being the villain. And we all cheer for him because it's fun. But Sal sees himself as this contemptuous person, but he throughout the book he actually is, all his actions are very heroic. Like the reasons that he does the things he does is to help the people around him and to keep the people around him safe. So the first line is, you want a hero. Before we start, you should know I'm not him. A hero is your Prince Charming, a firefighter, a cowboy. He's handsome and perfect. He's probably white. He has his shit together. None of that is me. And you're like, oh, it kind of gives me chills. I'm like, oh, it's such a good description.
Mm.
So it's this really kind of like 2D version of a hero. But then through the book, all of his behaviors I think are really heroic. Like you get, and Mia Hopkins' writing, I think, is so great because she peppers in backstory wonderfully. There's not this kind of info dump of like, I just got out of prison. I was there for chopping cars. My brother's still there. You know, it's just these little bits and pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And Holly's talked about this before, where it's like, as a reader, it makes me feel smart to get these crumbs. And then I'm like, oh, I just got a clue that there was an accident when he was in 3 years before he was in 10th grade, and he could hold it together until then, but that's why he dropped out at 10th grade. But that's like, 15% into the book, and we
Mm-hmm.
find
You got to
out
work for it
we
to
got to
figure
work
out.
for it. And we're like, oh, so these circumstances kind of pushed him into this path, and he was trying not to go into that path. So,
Mm-hmm. One way, talking about the backstory, when Mia Hopkins really did allow more of a exposition, like here's what happened, the way she wrote it is it was Vanessa asking Sal, well, why did you go to prison? Which is a
oh,
pretty
yeah.
normal thing, I think, for two people that are just starting to date. So he explains it to her, but instead of it just being an opportunity for us to read the facts that, well, he was stealing cars with his brother and they got caught, it is a strong emotional connection between the two characters because as he's describing what he did, he's also implying why he made the choices that he did. Basically, his brother got shot and he could have run away, but he stayed to help his brother because he was applying pressure to the wound and he couldn't leave his brother alone. And that's why he got sent to prison as well instead of escaping. So, as he's describing this to Vanessa, he then feels like a tear on his arm because she's laying on his chest and she's crying. And it serves this overarching purpose of the two of them are showing vulnerability with each other, trusting each other. She's telling him about the ways that she was involved with the gang and he's doing the same with her. So it doesn't
Kind of
feel
like
like,
grieving who they've had be.
yeah, exactly. So it's part of their growth. It's not part of a info dump, even
Yeah.
though we got what we needed out of the info dump. We got the information that we needed, but we didn't have to just sit through a couple of pages. Sometimes you get bored and you sort of scroll through a little bit faster because,
Yeah. You're like,
all right,
all
I
right, I
got
got
it.
it.
Thank you. I'm not interested in reading what happened in such a boring way. That there was none of that in this book.
Okay. So this is a lot of world and context. Let's go basics. Holly, what did Sal look like?
So he is a big dude. He says he's 210 pounds. It sounds like he's just built like an
Muscle.
absolute tank. He's very strong. His job is he's got two jobs and he's cleaning. He's like a nighttime janitor. One's at a gym and one's at a spa. And part of the deal with his gym job is that once he's done with all the cleaning, and I get the impression this is around like 4 a.m., he then gets to use all the facilities and work out every day. And then he cleans up after himself and he leaves before anybody else arrives. So the one of the side characters and one of the small little minor plots is talking about this gym and the way he works out. And the gym trainer is asking him, like, how did you get such a body? And he's just describing, like, well, I was in prison. This is one of the things we did. We did push-ups together. And then once he gets out, he finally has access to equipment. And it's a way for him to calm his mind. It's routine. I mean, we talked about how he has these anxiety attacks because he's now in this out of control, bustling world. He finds ways to create routine in his life. He has it just in the way he rides the bus to get to work. He works 7 days a week. Everything about his life seems pretty structured on purpose. And working out kind of epitomizes that. So his body shows it. And he's got all these tattoos. He's Mexican American. He says he's got curly hair
Curly dark
and
hair.
curly dark hair. And the way he describes his overall curb appeal, for lack of a better word, like what people
Curb
see,
appeal.
he really feels like he intimidates people. Like this book kind of takes place in two worlds. There's his neighborhood in East LA, and then he's on public transportation for 2 hours to get to Santa Monica on the west side. And that's where he is behind the scenes cleaning up other people, richer people's gym and spa in the middle of the night. So he really has some incentive to appear as non assuming as possible. So he says, if I'm quiet, people think I'm gloomy. I've noticed it's best for me if people think I'm a happy guy. So he kind of puts on a smile. He shaved his facial hair. He tries to cover up his tattoos if he's going out on the west side. He doesn't do any of that when he's at home. It's not that he's ashamed of his past or his gang tattoos or anything like that. He just doesn't want to intimidate.
He has this really like ingrained sense, I guess, learned experience that
Hmm.
he has to present a certain way. And
He's talking about how he's a low life, but at least he's a like a happy looking low life. Like he almost considers himself to be he realizes that a lot of people are interested and it's like he's a party trick.
right, he's
You know,
got
these
like, they want like the body and the tattoos, but he's like, these aren't a decoration. This
this
is
is who I am.
a result of the life that I have.
Right. And they're interested and think it's kind of cool to talk surface level and people want to ask him like, "Ooh, how'd you go to prison?"
Yeah.
And that definitely makes him uncomfortable, but he tries to just give people enough that it'll satisfy them, but they won't keep asking questions because he doesn't want to be treated like that.
Yeah, he, when you said that about, he smiles so people aren't intimidated, he had said, it pays to appear cheerful, a thug, but a friendly thug.
Mm, right.
And he goes, I want people to say, oh, Sal, that gangster, the ex-con, he's so nice. Give that fucker a raise. You know,
Yep.
that's this guy, and I love his inner commentary because it's this really, I felt like I was in this person's experience of
Mm.
how the world treats him and how, as a result, he's interprets the world, and it just was also heartbreaking. I'm like,
Yeah, everything for him always came back to I'm a screw up. That the reason I'm having these problems, or the reason the people that I love are having these problems, is because I did this horrible thing, or I'm a shameful guy, or I
yeah,
chose the wrong path. He's got so much self hate, and it's really sad.
it is sad. And
So his counterpart,
the basis of a romance novel is that it follows this structure, right? In that there is a love story that is the driver of the narrative, and that there's always a happily ever after.
sure,
Spoiler, there is a happily ever after for Sal.
there
And it's a
is.
good one. It's a good one. I like it. I'm like, yes. And this is the first in a three-part series of the three brothers. And so we see Sal's happily ever after carry on, which is always nice, especially when it's kind of hard won like Sal's. So the also pretty much every book these days has an epilogue, and then like the epilogue has an epilogue, and then maybe there's a tertiary epilogue.
Yeah, and then if you sign up on the newsletter, then you
You
get the
get
bonus
an
epilogue.
endless epilogue.
Uh-huh.
But so this is because I was so invested in Sal to have this the next two in the series, have him be featured prominently in it. It was felt nice because he continues to thrive. Don't worry, he continues to
Good.
thrive. But so you said, what about the other half? So for Sal, this it felt so much like kind of a literary fiction, just of how the writing was,
Mm.
but the basis of it is it's a love story, and that this love makes both the people stronger, and um, they find this resilience and these inner resources as a result of being together. So our first view of Vanessa is we'll talk about the setting in a second, but like his neighborhood in East LA is like such a character in the book. It's like everyone knows each other. It's these people that have grown up and looked out for one another. And so he's gotten his buddies gotten him kicked out of the couch he's crashing on, and this kind of like bang up scene at the start, so great, it kind of sets the tone. And he's standing there and he's got like nowhere to live, and this older woman, Janita, offers him a place to stay in this crappy, dirty, beat down like garage space.
Spider webby garage.
Just layered on top of
Yeah.
layered, like rats, but it's cheap and it's safe and it's somewhere to go. And so he can save money because he wants to save money so when his brother gets out of prison, he can keep his brother safe. Oh, Sal.
Mm.
But so he's just like slept in there the first night and he's getting up, whatever, going to shower, and he walks out the door and he gets a hose full of ice cold water and this like bellowing scream. And that's, we meet Vanessa, and she's living with her grandma and she has a daughter, a young daughter, I think.
She's 5.
She's 5. I think Vanessa's mom's always been out of the picture because she was addicted to drugs. And so it's like that kind of family structure where Vanessa grew up with her grandma and now they live, Vanessa's 24 also, I guess, or maybe
She's
23.
22. She's really young.
She's 22. Gosh, she's a little badass.
Yeah.
Um, so she's in her little like power business outfit, like buttoned up blouse, pencil skirt, hair tight back,
She's
makeup,
got her makeup on.
her signature fiery red lips, and she just looks pissed. And he's like, God damn, she's fine.
Yeah, he said the buttons on her blouse are struggling to do their job.
Yeah, he's
He's
like trying to like appease her, but he can't
trying so
stop.
hard to maintain eye contact, and he's telling himself, like, don't let your eyes look down, don't let your eyes stray. So she's short, curvy, absolutely just hits all his buttons, and he's had a crush on her since middle school because
Yep.
she
And we
was the
don't
girl.
know that until later. At first, we just think he's like,
Right.
oh, Vanessa from around the block. I know her. But then later, we're like, he thought about her in prison,
Yeah.
and we like heard that Sleepy got to be with her, and they got, she got pregnant. They got married. And he's like, what if I had been that guy? What if
Yeah. How
I
did
was the
that
one?
other gangster lowlife get her? What about
Yeah.
me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
he'd
that's what he
always
thought
wanted
about.
her, but thought I'm not good enough. And then she ended up with a gangster. He's like, oh, but I wanted her.
Yeah, so she is the way the book is set up at the beginning, you really get the impression that everybody knows everybody. So the fact that he
Yeah.
knows who Vanessa is, and he kind of the grandma that originally says, "Yeah, for $200 a month you can live in this garage." It makes sense that they all kind of know each other because that is the social scene that is set. So then, like you said, it gets revealed later that it's not just that he knows who she is, but he's been pining after her. But we just learn about her really through his point of view. And obviously, he has a crush on her. So we might have a little bit of a biased take. But she was the one that got straight A's, that was just like a ball buster, but also like just so in control of everything. And everybody in the neighborhood knew Vanessa's going to get out. And we find kind of revealed in bits and pieces, she had a full ride scholarship ready to go. She was going to be able to do whatever she wanted. But when she was 17, she fell in love with this gangster named Sleepy. They all have nicknames. Even Sal has a nickname. He goes by Ghost, but it's not used that often. So she fell in love with Sleepy. She got pregnant. And while she was still pregnant as a 17-year-old, Sleepy got killed.
Yeah, the
So
baby hadn't
she's
even been
now,
born yet.
yeah. So, and they got married right when she got pregnant. So she's now a 17-year-old widow, single mother. And she was with her grandma, and she managed to go to school and raise her kid. And she just had to fight so hard to get to this point. And throughout the book, she's studying for her CPA exam. Like she's basically just trying to better her career. So she's constantly just striving, even being put in this terrible situation of being a 17-year-old widow with a child. She's still working on making things better. And Salvador asks her, like, why don't you leave? You could go somewhere else. You know, you could try to go back to college again or whatever. And she says, I don't want to leave. This is my home. I belong here just as much as anyone else. So she has that feeling of this pride and sense of belonging. And she also has a very strong feeling of you better
Community.
not be doing anything with the gangs. Like you better behave yourself or I am kicking you out.
Right. Like the double strand, right? Just because
Yes.
A, I have a child and I don't want any of this like around my child. And B, the child's dad was actually killed as a direct result. So this
Yeah.
is the like double jeopardy.
So she's dealing with a lot of gang trauma as well. I mean, they both are. It's just a part of everybody's life.
And it's interesting the so this neighborhood is the in the writing there's woven in kind of bilingual phrasing and
Mm.
people kind of throw in different terms in Spanish or kind of slang. And if you don't speak Spanish, it isn't hard to infer the meaning. And I think really just lends to the overall feeling of who the people are in the neighborhood and how they talk to each other. And so I really liked that part myself. I
I
thought that it
think that's
added a
part of
lot.
what you were talking about with the way she weaves in the backstory.
Yeah,
She's giving context for the neighborhood, and even you can tell how heavily Spanish the neighborhood is through her writing, not because she says, "Oh, everyone here speaks Spanish," but the
right.
names they have, and it's just so seamless that it gives the setting is very detailed, and this the setting is kind of part of the way that we get such an insight into Sal. Everything we see is through his perspective because it's first person, single point of view, like we said, and that's where we see what is kind of heartbreaking, but what is also a source of real pride for him. And I don't know a lot, or let me just rephrase that. I don't know anything about the culture of, growing up in a gang and being in this really kind of socioeconomically depressed neighborhood, like what he's describing. But it really felt like I could understand what was happening and what his motivations were because there was so much information. And I was really surprised to learn that the author does not have any background in this kind of, sorry, her life. She didn't grow up in a neighborhood like this either.
So it's really interesting because they're also such an important part of like who's telling a story and whose story is it to tell.
Mhm.
I don't know the specifics, but reading this book, it felt incredibly respectful and honoring of this. And at the back of the book, there's a note from the author about her time working with people who had been formerly incarcerated and who were transitioning out of being in gangs and kind of like bridging.
Integrating into the rest of society.
Right, because it's a whole world to live in this one realm. And so although she wasn't personally in a gang or personally it sounds like didn't grow up in this specific neighborhood, it sounds like she's sharing the voices of stories that were shared with her and it
Hmm.
felt very respectful. And Sal is a character who was facing so many challenges, but he wasn't ever um, like it wasn't ever. It all felt so like true and caring. Like how he was represented. So perhaps someone who is from this a neighborhood like this might have a different experience reading it. But to me, it was really beautiful, and it seemed
Mm.
kind of like an homage almost to to the people of the neighborhood, the community, the care, and also um, like the bigger overarching story apart from that specific neighborhood and that specific gang is just people overcoming kind of seemingly impossible odds like Sal and Vanessa do because they have all these obstacles that are coming up against them and this love kind of bridges them up and out of it. So it's
Hmm.
kind of it's triumphant, But
Yeah.
yeah, I
There's one
thought she
example where Vanessa's love very clearly helps bolster him. So he's got this job cleaning the gym at night. And like I said, he's this big, like huge, just brick of a
got
man with these tattoos. And his boss, his white boss, who got money from his parents to open a gym, says, "Hey, why don't you come on as a trainer?" And he immediately feels a little funny about the offer. You can tell he doesn't think it's in his best interest, but he
yeah, and
also
he's been
thinks,
there like 6 months. He's kind of like,
right. And
why?
he says, "I don't have any training in that. I just work out. I learned everything from watching videos or reading books when I was in prison." And he says, "Oh, that's okay. I can teach you." And so you can tell he feels like he doesn't want to do it, but he also feels like, well, surely he's going to have to say yes because his boss asked him and it's this great opportunity. And part of his personality is caretaking. He wants to take care of everyone. And all he's thinking about is, well, if I do this trainer job, I can get more money. I can help my brother. I can give money to this person and that person. So he's conflicted because he doesn't want to, but he feels like he has to. And that's the story of his life. Every decision he ever makes, he has these rational reasons why he doesn't want to, but he feels like he has to. And he's talking to Vanessa about it. And he can't really articulate what the problem is. And she can. She does it for him. She says, "Oh, you feel like they would be using you and your boss just wants to stick you on all the
Promotional
billboards
materials.
and the
Yeah, they want to
promotional
use his
material.
image because he's this like hot, tough, edgy, and they're like, oh, you're gonna bring some like
Right.
allure to our
All our
chain.
clients would think it's so cool to have this ex-con teaching them how to lift weights, and he
Yeah,
would
and
just be
he's
a prop.
and yeah, he's like feeling icky about it, but also like, how can I say no?
Right. And the only way he's able to say no is Vanessa says, just tell him no. And she's
Yeah,
very, I mean, she doesn't take shit from anyone. And she gives him permission to say, oh, yeah, I don't want to. I can say no. And in his mind, like the gears are kind of turning. And that's what he does. He says no. And of course, Barry, his boss, is kind of rolling his eyes and incredulous, like, what? Why would anybody say no to me? But nobody's probably ever said no to this man in his life. And it then afterwards, Sal kind of has this reflection like, oh, it wasn't that bad. I can
yeah.
do this. I can say no. I can have a little bit more. Like, for as tough as he is, he doesn't have a lot of agency in his life because I think he's kind of learned through his experience that often he doesn't have a lot of choices. So then, even when he does have choices, he's got this almost like, I don't want to say learned helplessness because he's not a helpless character at all, but it takes him some training to get to the point where he realizes he can make his own decisions.
Right. Well, and this is the first time where he legitimately can. Because in
True. Yeah.
the
Yeah. Because he
gang,
said so many
he
things.
can't. Like you can't say no. You can be like, I can maneuver, but I can't actually tell my boss I'm not gonna do that anymore. And then in prison, you can't say no.
Sure. And yeah,
So
now he's got this opportunity. I kind of got this read from Sal that he's a different version of a people pleaser. And so often we read about people pleasers in the romance genre. It's usually the woman. She usually has this history of like her dad or her parents giving her conditional love, and she feels like she has to take on like all the projects at work and do everything everybody says, or else nobody's going to like her. And then that's kind of her insecurity that she's working through in the book. That seems pretty common to me. His is a little bit of a different style because it doesn't come necessarily from a feeling of weakness or even conditional love. That didn't come across so much. It's more just that he feels so responsible for everyone around him, probably because nobody's got anyone to rely on. And he just feels like, well, I can do this, so I have to. And he feels like he can't possibly turn anything down. If anybody offers him anything, any kind of scrap, he has to just gratefully accept it because otherwise he's letting everyone down around him. So it's more of like a wholesome feeling of responsibility to protect people and less about he's trying to like cover up a wound. Now he's got a lot of mental health issues in the sense that um, his self-esteem is just in the garbage.
hammered.
Yes.
Because he's like a good guy and does good stuff, and he's a bad guy and does bad stuff.
He has a real hard
Clash.
time making those two meet together. And he doesn't he's not able to put a name to it till the end of the book, but he self-harms when he's like starting to have anxiety and when he's doing things where there's that cognitive dissonance where like he wants to be a good guy but he knows what he's doing is bad. He starts to get anxiety and then he in his case he like pinches his arm really hard and
Yeah.
himself. It's he doesn't do
Yeah.
anything. He can do it out in public. He's just like pinching himself to the point of
Yeah. He's
bruises and
trying to
stuff.
ground himself, but it's a pretty brutal tool.
Yes. And a couple of times Vanessa's like, "Oh, what's that?" And he just says, I walked into a machine at work." Like he kind of lies to her. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I think when somebody asks you what something is and you lie about it, you probably know it's not right.
Yeah.
It's not healthy, but it takes him till the end of the book. He is in love with her. She accepts him. He goes to therapy, like all that kind of stuff.
Hooray
And
for
then,
therapy. We
yeah,
love
good for
therapy.
therapy. And so then he's like able to work through it. That's kind of more epilogue.
Well, and all these themes are sound so heavy, but also there's lightness. So I want to underscore that. Like the first time he sees Vanessa and he doesn't have his shirt on. And so he can see her checking his body out.
Uh huh.
And he's like doing these little like
It's like flexing.
subtle flexing, and he's just like, so there's this stuff too where he's like a funny, smart 24-year-old guy, so it's not all just this like,
But yeah, at its heart, it's two young people falling in love. I mean, that's a
totally,
pretty light
yeah.
topic right there.
Yeah, so there is all that kind of like just like fun. And even the opening scene where his buddy's getting kicked out of the house for cheating on his girlfriend Regina, and she's like tossing his PlayStation out the window.
All the people in the neighborhood are on
Everyone's
their
sitting there
porches. They're just
watching.
like, they got their coffee and their cigarette and they're just watching.
Really funny too, which I think is important because I'm feeling melancholy this week, so I'm feel like have this somber tone, but also it's fun to read.
Yeah.
One thing that was on my mind is how the people who are the people we look to for guidance in our life. So Sal, we get these snippets of like the mom and the daughter are gone from an accident. We don't know why. And I don't mean sorry, the mom and his sister. And
Mm-hmm.
so it was the dad, and then there was three sons. He's the
That's
oldest.
who's left behind after his mom and sister die.
And then we get this sprinkling that he's the one that from like eighth grade or seventh grade who's
Mm-hmm.
had to kind of carry the family, and we don't know why. And so then we learn that his dad, Dreamer Rosas, his nickname was Dreamer, is got a lot of problems, but he had this father figure in Ruben.
He's like in charge of their neighborhood.
Yeah, he's like the territory boss, and his name's Ruben, and he's just like a good leader, but also he is totally willing to use young people for his mercenary and personal gain. So he's a leader, but he's not a good guy. And Seth has this moment where he's reintegrating and he's thinking about like when he did perpetrated violence for his work, and Sal he asked Ruben like, how do you stomach this, and Ruben said, it's not violence to be violent. This is business. This is what we do. And so Sal would have to like remind himself like, oh, this is just what we do. He had this North Star that was all warped. It's not what he wanted to do, but it was just like, this is who I have to be in this scenario. This is just what we do. And then throughout the book, part of his arc too is kind of coming out of under the paternal role of Ruben, and like Vanessa powers him to do that too. It's felt like this person Ruben was kind of like grooming him to be more of a
Mm-hmm.
leader because he's super smart. And
It does feel like maybe Ruben was a father figure to everyone, but that he was particularly grooming Sal. I got that impression too.
yeah, so he has to do a growing in a lot of way, not just like leaving a criminal organization, but like leaving this role where this person's been kind of grooming him. And yeah, there are so many parts. And okay, this is part of the fun part. He turns out he's really great at chemistry.
Yeah.
He's so
Yeah.
good at order and systems and like precision, and it pays off.
A big part of his path out. I mean, part of it is dealing with the gang because it's like once you're in forever. So he has to figure that out. But he also has to come up with a way to find a new place in life. I mean, even if he could leave the gang, what now? He doesn't really have an identity or skills. He's a really hard worker and he's great at cleaning, but like what comes next for him? And what he ends up doing is becoming a brewer, a brewmaster. He befriends this guy who owns a bar slash brewery near his work in Santa Monica. And this is like a older guy. I get the impression he's, I don't know, in his 40s maybe. And he clearly just has a soft spot for Sal and takes him under his wing. And this guy is just like, hey, you're smart. You like to listen. Like, let me tell you everything about beer. And so Sal will go out, and this guy, Alan, will buy him dinner and give him all these beers. And he takes him around and shows him how to brew everything. And, oh, here, try this. We're going to do this. Oh, next weekend, we're doing this beer. And he's got like a notebook and he's taking notes. And he ends up becoming quite good at this. And through
Yeah.
Alan's tutelage and encouragement, he applies for a brewing school and he gets like the one scholarship that they offer each year.
Yes, he does,
Yeah,
because
so
this is a happily ever after.
it, Sal talks about how, wow, this is actually pretty interesting. And yeah, this white guy is actually giving me meals right now. This is weird. Like he has some thoughts about it, but he never really says, I'm good at this. I should pursue this. But the
Yeah,
way
and
we find
Alan
out,
like nurtures it. He's like a someone he's grooming him, but not in the negative way. He's like, I
right?
see your
Yeah,
potential and I'm investing in
is.
you.
It's
Like,
like the opposite of Ruben. He's
yeah,
putting in the same energy and he's also shaping him on a path, but it's like a path for his own good, not for Alan's benefit. And it's just through conversations that the two of them have that the reader can figure out that Sal's really good at this. He's got
yeah.
such a like the way we talked about how regimented his schedule is and his public transportation and his workouts. He takes employs that same kind of mentality to running all these experiments, doing all these different, he has to change the yeast and change the temperature, et cetera. And he's able to make this beer. And it also ties back into the story because his like magnum opus of beer, he comes up with his own flavor and he
Yeah.
blends like the Hefeweizen or something that Alan taught him with some of these unique like Mexican flavors from I think it's from like the bakery or from the spices of like
From the bakery. So yeah, so it's like spices and herbs. And so it's
from
this
his neighborhood.
yeah, so it's very evocative. And from the beginning, the way he describes things, it has this very poetic sense that is like a smell will bring him to a
Mm.
memory or a sense of place. So he smells something in the backyard where his little garage is. There's orange trees, and he has this really like deep sense of nostalgia. So he has this really from the beginning this tie of like
Yeah, he does. You're
scent,
right.
with an emotional experience, and so you see that come into play as he's
Mm-hmm.
making this beer of he creates home essentially like this representation of home for him that's emotional and um, loving and representative. And it all started with a porquito, these little brown molasses pig cookies that this bakery made. Porquitos, like a little pork, a little pig. And he tries one of Alan's beers the first time they meet, and Alan
He,
sees
he,
this
he says, like,
contemplative
oh, this
look.
reminds me of this thing I used to eat as a kid. And Alan says, bring me one.
Yeah, so it kind of put this thing into motion, and so it's all kind of like his inherent sweetness, or I guess like
Mm.
sensitivity and connection to the world around him is like the thing that shaped how he gets to move forward in the
And he
world.
names this beer East Side Pride,
Yeah.
which kind of goes back to this idea that he is not ashamed of
Oh
where he
yeah, it's
came
like an
from.
amazing, wonderful neighborhood. Like it's
Right.
so much to be proud of. It just also has
It just
this,
comes with these costs that, and he's trying to navigate the world, but same with Vanessa. It's not that they want to leave behind. They just want a new path forward.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
liked
So,
I liked Alan a lot. This side character. This is the first time I can remember in a book where the kind of best friend. That's not really how he described himself, but the main friend character that we see counsel the main character and kind of push some of the action in this book. Alan met him in the first. I don't know, maybe at like 15% of the way through the book. So, or sorry, Sal met Alan at the beginning of the book. So as the reader, we are meeting Alan and getting to know him at the same
oh
time
yeah, that's
that Sal
interesting.
is. And it's kind of was a fun take on the friend role because he had
Right.
a big role, the same as any other friend does in a book. But I liked getting to know him and he was kind of full of surprises himself.
Uh, so I recommend reading the other two in the series, but definitely read this one first because they could be read as standalones, but the characters are in the following books and they all make sense. Like the second book is about Trouble, the middle brother who's still in jail. So we see him as he is being released. So read the first one. Start with the first one.
Okay,
You'll be
that's good
happy.
advice.
Yeah. But it was really great. What are we going to read next?
We are reading Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry.
What? We're reading a book that just came out. It's
I
not at
know.
least 5 years old.
I'm excited about this one because I love Emily Henry. And somehow this really was not on my radar. And given that we read
Our
a lot of
life is
romance,
romance books.
I'm excited for this one. I like Emily Henry. If you want to read along with us, join us next week when we talk about it.
Yeah, or just join us because we will talk about it and you don't have to have read it. And I'm kind of excited because we really purposefully kind of mine through backlogs to find books that are a little bit different each week because we just want to have a wide range of who's writing the books, who's in the books, what's the
What
story,
what subgenre?
what's the subgenre. And Holly said, "Oh, there's a new book out by Emily Henry." I'm like, "What? We're going to be of the moment?"
We're so relevant.
We are so relevant. Well, that was so fun. Thank you, Mia Hopkins, for writing that beautiful book. Thank you,
Yes,
all the people who inspired that beautiful book. And let,
we will. We will
we'll
see
see
you
you
next
next
time.
time. Happily ever
Okay.
after.
Goodbye.
Bye.